24 hours eating prison food, what life behind bars really tastes like.
Subscribe, like,
comment. Because once you taste what happens behind these walls, there's no unwatching it. The sirens cut through the dawn as squad cars boxed in the loading dock behind the county jail. A corrections officer lay face down beside a pallet of sealed meal trays, his badge smeared with something darker than gravy. The clock on the wall read 5:17 a.m., breakfast hour. Inside the jail, doors slammed shut in a domino of steel, locking hundreds of inmates in place, while detectives flooded the corridor that smelled of bleach, powdered eggs, and panic. This wasn't supposed to be a crime scene. It was a food delivery. By noon, the story leaked. A documentary crew had been granted rare access to recreate a full 24 hours of prison meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, using official menus from U.S. county jails, UK remand prisons, and Australian correctional centers. The premise sounded harmless, even dull. But within hours of filming, someone was dead, evidence was missing, and the kitchen became the most dangerous room in the building. Detective Mara Klein arrived first. 15 years in major crimes had taught her that violence often hid where no one looked: laundries, storage rooms, places meant to be mundane. She stared at the fallen officer, then at the pallet. Identical trays labeled B1 through B480. Oatmeal bricks, a half pint of milk, a bruised apple. Standard issue. Repetitive. Safe. Except nothing here felt safe. The victim was Officer Daniel Ruiz, beloved, by the book, and scheduled to testify in a pending lawsuit over food quality and inmate health. Inmates had complained for years: meals too small, no fresh produce, endless starches. Mental health spirals. Fights over scraps. Ruiz had backed the inmates' claims, quietly.
too quietly, some said.
Cameras from the dock showed a shadowy figure swapping labels on trays. Not stealing. Replacing. The footage cut out at 5:03 a.m., 12 minutes before Ruiz was found. Inside the kitchen, investigators logged a missing crate marked UK remand dinner. No one could explain why it was even here. By evening, word spread through the tiers. Trays slid through slots, untouched. Hunger sharpened into fear. Someone had turned the most controlled thing in prison, food, into a weapon. Klein followed the paper trail to a locked basement cold room beneath the kitchen, a space not listed on any map. When they forced the door, the air rushed out like a held breath. Inside, stacked neatly, were meal trays stamped for tomorrow, already served. And on the top tray, written in grease pencil, were 3 words that changed everything. He knew first. By the time dawn broke again, the jail was running on emergency rations. Paper bags replaced trays. Water replaced milk. The administration called it a temporary disruption, but Detective Mara Klein knew better. Someone had engineered this chaos, and they'd done it with precision. The cold room discovery triggered a lockdown sweep. Officers counted trays like evidence, matching labels to menus published months earlier. U.S. breakfast portions. UK dinner calories. Australian lunch rotations. It was all there, except the missing crate. The one stamped UK remand dinner. The same menu Ruiz had flagged in his testimony notes as nutritionally indefensible. Klein met with Dr. Ellen Price, the county's contracted nutritionist, who hadn't slept since the body was found. Price admitted the UK menu had been quietly tested in the jail as a cost-saving pilot. Fewer fresh items. More fillers. Cheaper protein substitutes. It passed on paper, she said, voice shaking. But inmates reported dizziness, aggression, depression. Ruiz documented everything. Security footage yielded another clue. At 4:41 a.m., a civilian kitchen worker entered the prep area using Ruiz's badge. The face was obscured by a hairnet and mask, standard issue. The walk was wrong, though, too confident, too familiar. This wasn't a random intruder. It was someone who belonged. Then came the first disappearance. Liam Mercer, a film assistant from the documentary crew, failed to report for questioning. His last text, sent at 6:02 a.m., read, "Found something in the menus. Not safe to talk here." His access card was discovered hours later, tucked inside a lunch cart bound for cell block D. Inmates began talking. A trustee claimed the missing UK dinners weren't missing at all. They'd been served early, off schedule, to a single tier housing vulnerable detainees. Within hours, 3 fights broke out. One suicide attempt. A man curled on his bunk whispering that the food was messing with his head. Klein followed Mercer's trail to the documentary's editing bay, a converted storage office. On a monitor paused mid-frame was a spreadsheet overlaying menus with incident reports. Red spikes aligned with specific meals. The UK dinners weren't just cheaper. They were triggering high glycemic loads, sodium shocks, no fiber. Designed to calm on paper. Destabilizing in reality. Taped to the wall was a photo of Ruiz smiling beside the kitchen staff. Someone had circled a face in black marker. The name beneath it, Deputy Warden Cole. As Klein reached for her phone, the power cut. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in red. Over the intercom, a calm voice spoke. "Detective," it said. "You're asking the wrong questions. Check tonight's dinner." Dinner carts rolled at 6 p.m. sharp, pushed by officers with eyes too alert for routine. The trays were back, identical, sealed, labeled. Official menus restored, the warden announced. Normalcy reasserted. Detective Mara Klein watched from the catwalk as slots clanged open, steel mouths accepting what they were given. She didn't believe in coincidences. Not after a voice had warned her to check tonight's dinner. She intercepted a cart bound for cell block D. The label read, AU Correctional, Dinner. Meatloaf patty, instant mash, canned green beans. Standard. Klein broke the seal anyway. Beneath the mash, pressed flat like a note under a door, was a laminated card. Not contraband. A compliance memo. It listed substitutions approved during supply constraints, signed by Deputy Warden Cole. The date predated Ruiz's death by 3 weeks. In the infirmary, Dr. Price showed Klein charts she'd been afraid to submit. Elevated blood pressure spikes after specific meals. Increased self-harm ideation. A pattern that matched the spreadsheet Mercer had found. "We were told to stop tracking it," Price said. Cole said it would confuse the optics. Mercer was found at 7:18 p.m., alive but barely. Locked inside a dry storage cage behind the kitchen, dehydrated, wrists bound with cling film. He kept repeating one word, labels. When Klein pressed him, his eyes filled. They weren't swapping food, he said. They were swapping responsibility. Same trays, different countries. Different standards. If someone got hurt, no one knew who owned it. A call crackled in from intake. An inmate collapsed during dinner. Then another. The infirmary flooded. Sodium overload, the doctor said. Not lethal alone, but stacked on dehydration and stress, it pushed bodies over the edge. Klein sprinted back to the kitchen. Deputy Warden Cole stood by the steam tables, sleeves rolled, calm as ever. "We're feeding people," he said. "That's the job." "You're testing them," Klein snapped. "And Ruiz tried to stop you." Cole smiled thinly. Ruiz didn't understand scale. Security footage finally rendered clear. The shadow-swapping labels wasn't hiding, it was authorized. Cole's badge. Ruiz confronting him at the dock. A shove. A fall. The camera cut where policy allowed it to cut. As officers moved in, an alarm blared from the cold room. Someone had opened it again. Inside, Klein found the missing UK crate, empty now, except for one final tray placed center, untouched. On top sat a printed menu for tomorrow, highlighted in yellow. Next to it a note in grease pencil. Midnight service. From the tiers above, chanting rose. Hungry, angry, unified. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one, hit subscribe so you don't miss it. At 11:58 p.m., the jail went quiet in a way that felt unnatural. No shouting. No metal banging. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the slow grind of ventilation pushing stale air through concrete veins. Detective Mara Klein stood outside the kitchen, staring at the highlighted menu marked midnight service. There was no such meal on any official schedule. That was the point. Deputy Warden Cole had vanished during the confusion. His office was empty, computer wiped, phone left behind in a drawer. He hadn't run. He'd planned this exit the same way he'd planned the meals. Clean, compliant, deniable. The first carts moved just after midnight, escorted not by officers, but by supervisors. That was the tell. Klein stopped one cart and tore open a tray. Inside was a hybrid meal, US portions, UK substitutes, Australian sodium levels. It wasn't meant to nourish. It was meant to prove a concept. That standards could be blended, blurred, outsourced until no single authority could be blamed for the damage. Over the intercom, Cole's recorded message played, calm and rehearsed. He spoke about budgets, overcrowding, efficiency, about how hunger made inmates compliant, how agitation justified force, how data could be massaged if responsibility was scattered across borders. This is the future, his voice said. And it works. It didn't. Inmates refused the trays. Word had spread faster than policy ever could. Trays slid back out untouched, clattering to the floor. A silent protest, unified and undeniable. Cameras captured it all. Hundreds of identical refusals, time-stamped and clear. Cole was caught an hour later at a private airstrip, carrying a binder of menus and signed approvals. The evidence Ruiz had died protecting. Weeks later, the lawsuit exploded into a federal investigation. International suppliers were named. The contracts frozen. Dr. Price testified. Mercer released the documentary footage Ruiz had secretly authorized. The jail revised its menus, added fresh food, and published transparent standards. It wasn't justice for everyone, but it was something. Mara Klein visited Ruiz's grave on a gray morning, leaving behind a sealed meal tray, untouched. Breakfast hour had passed. Food seems small, routine, invisible, until you realize who controls it and why. And somewhere in 100 facilities, menus were being reread with new eyes. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one, hit subscribe so you don't miss it.